expression for many years at New Line that is the house that Freddy built. It's the house that Freddy built, the house that Freddy built to think a few wings on. Nightmare on Elm Street was the very first huge hit. People started really thinking of them seriously as a studio.
Every time you have a success, it propels your company forward. That was our first one.
He really brought the company to a level where they could potentially compete.
We went from a company that was very little known to be much more respected.
This is the place that you think of when you think of quality horror films. New Line has grown from the independent world to a big studio.
Everything came off of Nightmare. And ultimately, so did Lord of the Rings.
Freddy's a great stalwart, certainly one of the big supports holding up New Line Cinema.
One could say that if we hadn't had Nightmare on Elm Street, our house would be rather dilapidated.
New Line Cinema was a couple of guys. It was Bob Shea and Sarah Risher. There was no New Line Cinema the way we know it today, where it's a huge organization.
What I learned at New Line is you do everything yourself because you can't afford to hire a lot of people to do things.
The basic business was selling Reefer Madness and a couple other small films.
If they sound weird, we probably distributed them. We distributed films like Creepers, Mountain of the Cannibal Gods. My particular interest in horror films was that they were inexpensive to make or acquire and fairly reliable in terms of being able to sell. I was drawn to it just by virtue of our position in the industry, which was pretty low on the totem pole.
Then Bob wanted to get into making movies, and the first film we made was called Alone in the Dark.
Jack Palance wouldn't come out of his trailer the first day, and we said, why? He said, because he didn't want to do any night work. It is called Alone in the Dark, Jack. Jack Palance also announced that he was against violence, and so he didn't want to do any killing. So all he got to do was to menace everybody, and the other two guys did all the killing. It did satisfy an audience and find its audience, and that's the best part about being in the movie business. The first film that we released that really had the kind of success that we were hoping for was Nightmare on Elm Street.
When I first saw Freddy, I was just scared to death. Burnt flesh and the blood with razor blades on fingertips.
It was wonderful to be around the birth of what became a really big hit.
$4 million made over the weekend. Like, that was like a huge amount of money.
It was the must-see movie for the dorm guys and the slackers, and then it just grew and grew and grew.
The video cassette came out, then everyone started to see it.
This is a dream! This isn't real!
It had taken on this life.
Of course, after we saw it, we go, sequel. He's such a good character, they're probably going to bring him back.
To Freddy.
We sold it well internationally, and our distribution people at that time said, listen, this is a perfect movie to do a sequel with. And I said, okay, let's get going and try to make a sequel.
Bob did call me for Nightmare 2 and sent me the script, and I just really felt the script was inferior.
Absolutely nothing. I mean, nothing wrong with this house.
I heard that they had created a script and didn't have my character in it.
I'm scared.
Jesse, who is doing this to you?
Fred Krueger.
Nightmare 2 had a problem because the concept was that Freddy was going to come into the real world and then terrorize people. And nobody really liked that. They liked Freddy in the dream world.
Seeing him at a pool party just hacking up kids.
I think the second one was a bit of a warning to Bob that he needed to put more into it and kind of honor the films.
Made more money than the first. That's the way the world goes.
So, of course, we realized we had to start Nightmare 3. It's all over.
With the Nightmare on Elm Street 3, I think that they really got the story back on track.
The way Elm Street 3 began, Wes, he had written the script and then he wasn't particularly involved. Wes had done some great surreal imagery, but I thought we could actually enter the dreamscapes.
Are you ready?
In my case, having kids find their own dream powers.
Steven, be gone!
That's when they really started delving into Freddy taking each of these kids, some weakness that they had.
Let's get high.
Really exploiting it and making it more personal.
Nightmare 3 was received very well. I was delighted. Grosses in the box office were more than the first two put together, and it really became a bigger franchise after 3.
Oh my God. It's what every studio dreams of, is to have a franchise.
Perhaps there was more being spread around.
And here we made a movie that had no intention of being one and then ended up going for 15, 20 years.
I love the fourth movie. It was really scary. The look of it was darker. Freddy was darker. Part 5, The Dream Child, the first film set I ever went to, and it featured the Dream Pram, the Dream baby carriage with big old spiky wheels.
I love the whole idea that Freddy wanted to get to her baby.
Nightmare 5, I think, got a little over the top with the little baby Freddy.
He's the bastard son of 1,000 maniacs. One of the inmates is played by Robert Englund.
It was an interesting concept of Freddy affecting an unborn baby's dreams or using those dreams to get into reality.
School's out, Cougar.
Whenever you're the first in a line of successive projects, I felt very protective of the whole thing, you know, kind of like the mother hen. I didn't want them to make a bad one, that's for sure.
We didn't have much else. You had to just find something, or otherwise we'd just be living from hand to mouth as distributors. It was all we had on our shelf, so we had to keep reusing it.
The idea of, well, let's just kill him, like for good and for real, that had a lot of resonance.
Time to die, you scar-faced dick!
And what we ended up doing is hiring multiple people to try to come up with different takes.
Oh, I want your little friends. Maybe they could help.
I brought up the idea of Peter Jackson, whom I knew from his early splatter films, and he did come up with a take. The title of it was called The Dream Lover, but at that point the script that Rachel Talalay was supervising was in, and also was really strong, and had this Freddy's Dead concept, and the idea that it was going to be in 3D at the end. I still remember the first test we had for VHS, and they gave us the glasses, and they said, okay, here's the test, and they showed us this footage, and when the test was over, we looked at each other and went, I didn't see anything. The technology just wasn't right there yet for the VHS side.
Welcome to Freddy 101. What you have is the first film, which is unique and a groundbreaker. And then because of the popularity of that character, you have the Freddy Krueger phenomenon of let's make him into a fun guy.
Krueger! Well, it ain't Dr. Seuss.
Wes gets a little ticked off by where we went in the series with the humor.
No screaming while the bus is in motion.
But Freddy's funny in the first one. He takes the face off of Tina and puts it on himself.
Freddy.
And he cuts his fingers off.
I think with the third movie, that's where they really came up with the kind of one-line quip before he kills somebody.
This is it, Senator. Your big breaking TV.
Welcome to prime time, bitch.
He was still capable of killing you, but he did it and made a great joke at the same time.
How's this for a wet dream?
And of course, the subsequent movies, you have these enormous production numbers of dreams. Dreams in which Freddy Krueger can do absolutely anything that could be done in a Looney Tune.
Told ya, comic books was bad for ya.
So Freddy Krueger is now the Henny Youngman of horror. And we just kind of forget that he was, of course, this child killer, because he's so funny.
Bon appetit, bitch. This is my favorite.
The success of Freddy basically gave rise to Moonlight's merchandising department.
Now there's some great silly stuff that came out in the picture books and the posters.
There were dolls.
I still have all kinds of creepy Freddy dolls of all different sizes. Big ones, there was even some pull-string dolls. Something about a toy of Freddy is actually a very creepy thing.
The most fun part of it to me was Freddy becoming the most popular Halloween costume.
Little kids had Freddy sweaters.
To look out on Halloween and see little kids crossing the street in front of your car or whatever wearing Freddy costumes.
There's something a little twisted about that. What are you dressed up as? The guy who murdered and molested children. What are you?
The idea had spread beyond anything that we could contain at the time.
Well, there was a long period where I felt that this thing was making incredible amounts of money, and I wasn't participating in any way of any significance at all, and it was kind of painful. And then something very interesting happened. Bob Shea actually called me up and said, you know, I've heard things, I've read things, and, you know, why don't you come in and we'll talk? I went in, and he said, first of all, I want to hear all your complaints. If I offended you, if I did anything, let me know. So I had a very frank kind of airing. And to his credit, he says, well, make those things right. And he gave me a significant retroactive participation. I thought it's pretty incredible. I can't think of another studio that would have done that. And then he said, the other thing is, we killed Freddy off in the last one, and we said he was absolutely dead.
Happy Father's Day.
We just feel around here that we could maybe bring Freddy back one more time, but we don't know how to do it. I decided to have lunch with everybody, and I had Robert, Heather, people I hadn't seen in years. And everybody talked about how the film had changed their life. Heather had, for instance, been stalked.
Leave us alone, you son of a bitch!
And I was telling him like how it was just making me crazy and I was scared all the time.
He started again. And he's putting stuff in my mail again.
And so then like 2 weeks later on my doorstep is this script that's like everything that I had told him in the context of Freddy Krueger.
Miss me.
It was a serious movie. Freddy had a new look, touched on a lot of the cool scenes from the original movie.
Look at number 1, and then you look at number 7, and then you get a sense of what Wes Craven wanted to do.
Nightmare really changed everything for New Line.
Up to number 4, 3 and 4 were both well done, delivered the goods, and very much an important aspect of the company.
The fact that you were successful exploiting and promoting and marketing a property lets other suppliers know that you could be a destination point.
You've got the body. I've got the brain.
We used the success of Nightmare on Elm Street as a calling card to investment bankers to have our own initial public offering. With the additional financing that we had, we were able to increase our bank line and do a lot of other things so that we weren't only beholden to a Nightmare on Elm Street.
What?
Bob was able to put together a deal with RCA Columbia Home Video, and they did an output deal with us for 10 pictures, and the first 2 were going to be Critters.
Critters, New Line's answer to the Gremlins. Critters were these little puppets from outer space that basically they're here to eat you. They actually look like porcupines, and they shoot these killer spikes out at you. It spawned a theatrical sequel, Critters 2, and then 2 more direct-to-video. And we are looking to resurrect the Critters brand. The Mangler, the killer washing machine. Really gruesome. Not that they showed you so much, but it was definitely a gut test. So of course, I'm like, oh, I think this movie's making me sick. We have to buy it. Man's Best Friend. That was the dog who had gotten injured, and they put all these parts in. It was like Terminator dog. The Hidden was a really intelligent sci-fi movie. The story was good. The action was great. Hidden alien-type creature.
We're talking spaceman here.
Where it would look for its host and would turn into that host. It really wasn't just a shock movie. It was like a thinking person's horror sci-fi movie.
The Blade films were a lot of fun. There was a combination of kind of a martial arts vampire thing that I hadn't seen before.
Hit, edgy, based on a comic book. The great thing about that franchise is they really stayed true to the vision of the filmmakers on that. It was a dark vampire movie, it had an African-American lead. New Line took a chance on a concept that was before its time, and now everybody's doing urban horror films.
I especially liked 7. It kind of took thrillers into horror. I thought it crossed the genre.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a homicide.
7 is a kind of strange subgenre of crime films where you have spectacular crimes committed with a theme.
Honestly, I've never seen anything like this.
Aside from the whole movie being dark, the ending's really grim and depressing, and I know that a lot of the studios wanted to cut that, and New Line took a chance on that movie and made something really special. That was a movie that showed that New Line could attract the A-level talent, the A-level directors. That just showed that New Line was a force to be reckoned with, not just the studio that could carve out the niches.
I think that in some cases the studios look at horror films from a bit of a distance, as if it's the ugly stepchild of film genres, when in fact, if you're in a theater, that's where you'll hear the greatest reactions.
There's always room for a good horror film. People love a good scare. There would not be 7 different Freddy movies if there wasn't an audience for it.
Horror films did not always have a franchise. Now it's almost a given that you're going to have a franchise.
The Friday the 13th franchise was at Paramount for many, many years, and it features the exploits of Jason Voorhees. He's the one that came back for years and was hacking his way through Camp Crystal Lake and killing numerous teenagers.
The Friday the 13th movies are strictly, it's just one formula. If you have an orgasm, you're going to have a spear put through you, literally.
We looked at that character and saw that there was still a life in what was considered by our competition that it had run its course. And Sean Cunningham, who's the producer of those films, had the thought that maybe we should make more and maybe New Line's the right place to do it.
I went to Mike Lynn and Bob Shea, who I knew, who were running New Line. What if we took Freddy and Jason, we put them in the same movie? They thought it was a great idea if I could just get the rights. And I was able to get the rights from Paramount and Warner Brothers and be able to bring them to New Line. So then we got to make Friday 9.
We resurrected him. Jason goes to hell. Jason's out chasing after the young teenagers at a camp. Jason does go to hell at the end of the movie. Up comes Freddy's glove.
Which was in anticipation of what we hoped was going to be the Freddy Jason heavyweight prize fight. And we were not able to convince people in New Line that we had broken the back of the script. Once again, I'm saying, well, we're going to have to keep it alive somehow. What if we did Jason in space?
Critters went to outer space. Hellraiser went to outer space. Now Jason goes to outer space.
Everybody would say, Freddy versus Jason, that's great, I want to see it. But then you read a script and you say, oh, that's not very good.
The rules are inherently incompatible. Freddy, it's the dream world, and how does he access people? Do they need to be asleep? Is he asleep? So how do you get Jason into dream world or Freddy into the real world? New Line really wanted to find the right story because we don't want to jump the shark on this movie because you could destroy both franchises. We developed Freddy vs. Jason for 10 years before we finally got a script that we liked enough to make, and when we made it, it actually was a great success.
People were just so curious to see these two pop icons trying to duke it out in some sort of a world heavyweight horror match.
It was worth waiting for because Ronnie, you got it right.
For the film to do over $80 million in the box office was just fantastic. I think it really surprised everybody. Also goes to show you that the horror fan base is very loyal, and they love both of these characters.
Like Friday the 13th, Leatherface is under the umbrella now of New Line Cinema, which is a good thing.
It is interesting that New Line now has the rights to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street because you have Freddy, Jason, Leatherface all in the same place.
You're looking at the same thinking that went on 40 years ago with Universal. Universal Pictures had the rights to Dracula, the Frankenstein monster, the Wolfman, and the Mummy.
And as they start running their course, then all of a sudden it's Frankenstein versus the Mummy and the Wolfman. And eventually it was Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
For New Line to get Jason, Freddy, and Leatherface, by rounding up these three mythic killers under one banner, you have a franchise. Not one franchise, but three.
Part of it is that Bob Shea really digs horror movies. It is the foundation on which the company was built.
You don't want to miss the bus.
We have a horror idea. Our head of production, to his credit, will go. Talk to Bob.
There are certain reliable genres in movie entertainment that have been pretty solid citizens and reliable in terms of creating a profit for the investment. Think back, there will be a lot of films that have been low-budget horror movies.
Final Destination really was started out from the meetings back in the day. Let's make a really cool horror movie and make one good one.
You can just drop fucking dead.
I was sitting on a plane one time and I read this article about this woman who was going to take a flight, and her mother called her the night before she was going to get on the plane and said, "Don't take that flight. I have a bad feeling about it." And the woman didn't take the flight and the plane went down. You know, what if she was meant to die on that flight? And what if death came after her? And I was like, holy crap, we've never seen death in a movie.
What if we were not meant to get on that plane? What if it still is our time?
The first Final Destination was actually a sleeper hit of the year. It was one of New Line's biggest hits that year. death is always around us. I think it's a movie that could continue going on as long as there are new and interesting stories to tell.
Anytime you can create a franchise that people are familiar with or excited by, it's a huge plus.
The key thing is just to look for good stuff, and then the franchise will find you. I mean, Lord of the Rings is the classic example. No one here thought that was going to be a $3 billion kind of home run. Everyone sort of thought this will be good, but no one thought it would turn into the phenomenon it did. New Line Cinema is a studio that takes chances, and these chances, more often than not pay off, and when they do pay off, you get really good films. One of the great beauties of New Line is to pick stories that have, at their core, something that appeals to an avid, motivated audience of filmgoers. Leatherface, Freddy, Jason, Pinhead, Michael Myers, not our characters, yet the future's pretty exciting. I don't know if we'd see a Freddy versus Leatherface versus Jason versus Death. It's really hard to predict where horror is going to be in the future, but I'm sure New Line will actually be there, making the good stuff.
He comes to me at night. His name is Fred. He keeps trying to take me to the boiler. He wants to kill me.
What is a dream?
It is a portal between our inner and our outer world.
Information that comes to us while we are sleeping from another dimension, another reality.
What is a dream? Nobody really knows. Dreams are pretty amazing places, and it is possible to use them a bit, because I think that's what the mind is doing.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Throughout history, mankind has been fascinated by dreams and has strived to understand them and their role in our waking lives.
Dreams are considered important in virtually every culture in the world, and throughout history. Some cultures would say this is the way that God speaks to us. Other people would say that there are other friendly spirits who are helping us with those dreams.
There is a universal awe of dreaming and a universal fear of dreaming. There's not a civilization in the world that hasn't developed a folklore deriving from dreams.
This is new.
These are ancient dream demons. Supposedly they roam the dreams of the living, and they give them the power to cross the line and turn our nightmares into reality.
We have actually records on clay tablets from the Assyrians in Mesopotamia. So our interest in dreams go back to what was the dawn of humankind.
Many ancient civilizations believed that dreams held special powers and organized their societies around them.
The Egyptians looked at dreams as prophetic. There were special dream interpreters, and they had prominence, especially if a king, a pharaoh, or someone of royalty would dream a dream. It was very, very important. The Greeks had an incredible dreaming culture for over 1,000 years. There were dream temples, about 400 of them. This was specifically for healing.
If you had a physical problem, disease, you would go to a temple where you would spend the night sleeping. And in this temple, there would be snakes all around you, crawling over you, until you had a dream, which gave you the information that you needed to have around the illness that you were dealing with.
The earlier cultures really looked at the different ways of approaching the dream itself.
Very often people were looking for disclosure of the future. We find evidence of that in the Bible, Old Testament, dream of Joseph, dream of Jacob, Jacob's ladder, also contact, let's say, with the divinities, with the gods and with the goddesses.
Native American cultures, dreams being very, very important. This is the Great Spirit. This is Wonkantanka talking to you. And so you pay great attention to them.
The Chinese, for example, believe that the spirit actually leaves the body during dream time.
They feel that The dream is an entry point into deeper worlds. And that sort of approach is quite frequent in the East, in other religions.
That's pretty. What is that?
This is my Malaysian dream doll. It's supposed to bring good dreams.
The Balinese were the culture that I discovered that was most interesting, and because they have a system of kind of teaching their kids lucid dreaming, to be aware that they were dreaming while they were dreaming. It's a whole different way of looking at it. And basically it's saying this is part of my mind, can be used by me.
The important point here that every culture in the world pays attention to dreams and realizes that they have some importance.
People have always tried to make sense out of dreams, this behavior, and that I'm sure will continue, whether or not there's sense to be made of it, and I think that's the real issue.
What the hell are dreams anyway?
Mysteries. The truth is, we still don't know what they are or where they come from.
Do dreams serve some essential purpose for the human mind? Or are they simply a byproduct of normal brain activity? Science has not yet provided an answer.
There are many theories about why we have to dream, and none is really conclusive.
It may be that what you see is what you get, that dreams are just something that sort of spins off brain processes that are going on that have no real significance, and they may not be much more than that. It's still quite unclear whether there's some vital physiological processes that go on in sleep that don't happen at other times.
I don't see why you couldn't just give me a pill to keep me from dreaming.
Everyone's got to dream, young lady. If you don't dream, you go.
In 1900, Freud wrote a very influential book called The Interpretation of Dreams, where Freud indicated that dreams are important in understanding a person's neuroses, psychoses, their mental state of health, and showed how to work with dreams.
That really re-established, you might say, the importance of the dream in many ways in the culture, and established it within the psychological discipline. The researches of Carl Jung was the next significant milestone.
Jung's idea was that they were kind of ancient symbols and sort of thought structures, and that we were all connected in some ways to each other at the base level of thought and feeling and dreams.
All day long I've been hearing those fingernails. Fingernails? That made me remember the dream I had last night. What'd you dream? I dreamed about a guy in a dirty red and green sweater. Nancy, you dreamed about the same creep I did.
Jung said, oh, dreams are telling us much more about what's going on. It's just not about us. It's about many things. And it's just not tapping into our lives now on an ego level. It's tapping into a much larger place, the place where Freddy Krueger lives.
Nightmares are the darker mysteries of the dream world. Do they come from a different place? Do they carry a more sinister message?
Out of all the chaos and the input that we deal with on a daily basis and we take in, our dreams need to process it and put it into a kind of a shape. Some of those shapes are nightmares.
Guys can have nightmares too, you know. You can get a corner on the market or something.
Many times people make distinctions between dreams and nightmares, and all a nightmare is a dream which brings really important information for us to understand, but the ego gets frightened by it.
It's dealing with things that are very, very unprocessed, or perhaps not reconciled or resolved in the mind yet. They are about blood, and they are about aggression, and they are about violence, and everything that we're taught not to be when we're kids, but is still lurking around there in very powerful ways in our subconscious all the time.
I know now that I brought him into my world. We all did. Gave him all the energy he needed. Our screams were all he needed.
And certainly in Nightmare on Elm Street, I felt like Freddy, beyond a character that somebody thought up, stood for tendencies of human beings, especially males, to be destructive and to want to slash and burn as opposed to nurture and protect.
The shadow part of our ourselves, our psychological shadow. Those parts of ourselves that we don't want to deal with, mommy and daddy told us not to deal with, or our society tells us not to deal with. We push it in the background, in the closet. It gets angry in that closet. It gets angry being pent up like that. And so when we let it out, when he comes out, he's angry as hell.
And so it will come and menace the individual in the dreams, and that's a good attention getter. When you scare somebody, then you sure get their attention.
I would say if we paid more attention to Freddy, dialogue with Freddy, get Freddy to cut his nails a little bit, love Freddy a little bit, he would transform into something else.
What other secrets does the sleeping mind hold? Are dreams powerful enough to affect our waking life?
We live in an age of sleep dysfunction. I mean, all you have to do is watch TV every night and see all the advertisements for sleep aids. There have been all kinds of reports recently of people taking, sleeping medications who wake up in the middle of a traffic accident, and the last thing they remember was getting into bed.
A classic example I read in the New York Times about a year ago was a woman who got up, walked out on the street, went to a construction site, and woke up on something like the 4th story in one of those beams lying there. And they had to, rescue to get her down.
These people sometimes will even tie themselves to the bed after a while because it becomes so predictable. They can injure themselves, they can punch the wall or anyone with them. Obviously, after a little while, people learn not to sleep with them, but it really is acting out a dream.
While many instances of such activity have been recorded, no one really knows what humans are capable of. Can a person commit murder under the influence of a dream?
He took this knife and stabbed her over again.
In the middle of the night, Scott Falater stabbed his wife 44 times and dragged her body to the family swimming pool. He later claimed he had no knowledge of the crime and had been sleepwalking.
A murder being committed in a sleepwalking state is plausible. While he was sleepwalking, a dream could have been happening and he could have been acting it out in some way.
I assume that I must have gone crazy or something in my head had broken.
We know that people can be aroused and their behavior changes rather dramatically, and typically they don't engage in really complicated behaviors. If you recorded his brainwave activity, you might find something unusual during this period, or you might find perfectly normal calculating behavior.
It's open to possibility. It doesn't mean that somebody's doing it in this case that defense was correct. If you're accused of a murder, most people would do anything to avoid the consequences of that.
The simple explanation is that he woke up and he did it, and he went back to sleep, not that he was asleep.
In this case, the jury agreed, and Scott Falater was convicted of murder. Perhaps even more frightening is the idea central to the Nightmare on Elm Street films, that dreams can be deadly to the dreamers themselves.
There is a kind of a superstition that if you die in a dream, you really die. But I think there's a bit of the urban legend going on there.
A lot of people die in their sleep. After all, it happens all the time. The question is whether someone can be killed by a nightmare.
Sudden, unexpected nocturnal death syndrome is something that's been widely reported, in which people die, apparently in the midst of nightmares.
All reports were the same. A person in apparently good health went to sleep and died. Often the victim displayed labored breathing, screams, and frantic movements just before death. The Centers for Disease Control investigated these mysterious deaths, but no medical cause has yet been found.
Wes Craven read some newspaper articles about this syndrome, and that was his immediate inspiration for the Nightmare series.
I just kind of noted it as something that was strange and weird, and doctors had not known what had caused it, but it had elements of the story that were really almost you'd lift them out of the newspaper story and put them into a movie.
Why do you want to stay awake? Because if I fall asleep, I'm not waking up.
We don't know if anybody can be killed by a nightmare because they can't tell us.
Very few people whom you find dead in the morning are able to tell you what they dreamt before they died.
Are dreams a doorway to another world? Is there something sinister lurking in our nightmares waiting for us? The answer, much like dreams themselves, remains a mystery.
Dreams have always been with us. It's something we return to again and again, just as we return to it every night.
And now I lay me down to sleep. I pray to Lord my soul to keep. And if I die before I